Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today I'm doing a video that is centered around books I regret ever reading. So we all know there are a couple of books that we read and we just hate reading them. Either that's something that's completely out of our typical genres that we like, or it has horrible writing, you cannot connect with characters, and so on. So over the last couple of years since I got back into reading, I've read a lot of different books across a lot of different genres, and there have been books that I do regret reading. I used to hate DNFing books, so I would completely finish them even though I hated reading it. So I've kind of unlearned that behavior, and if I don't like a book, I will not read the book anymore. So yeah, this video is dedicated to my mistakes in finishing these books because I was just too scared to put it down. So I'm going to tell you the 13 books that I regret ever reading. So the first one is A Game of Thrones. So I absolutely hated the TV show when I watched the first couple of episodes in season 1. So I kind of knew that the book might not be my cup of tea, but my boyfriend challenged me to read this book and see if I might enjoy it. And then if I did, we could retry this TV series because it is one of his favorites. And I just absolutely hated reading this book. It was so long. I could not connect with the story. So with each chapter, we changed perspective, and I really felt disjointed in that sense because it kept jumping from person to person, from area to area, and it was really difficult to maintain a connection when every 10 to 15 pages you were changing perspective. So I really hated that book, and it was such a long book, so it was horrible to read. I ended up listening to the audiobook at the same time so I could get through it quicker. But yeah, when I finished it, I was so disappointed in the book that I will never want to reread anything like that again. The next book is actually quite a surprise, I'm sure, because everyone knows that Stephen King is the master of horror and is such a big name and an influential author of our modern time. And I've been reading all of his works. I'm currently up to 34 at this point, and I do regret reading one of his books, and that book is From a Buick 8. I despised reading this book. I got this in an abominable book box as a pre-loved book. So I read it, and I just didn't like the writing style in this. I always say that Stephen King often overwrites, and I could definitely see that in this book. The development of the characters as well, it was just a bit bizarre, and I just didn't really enjoy the reading experience with this book. So yeah, just wasn't it. I think I rated it a 1.5 star because I just did not connect, and I think that's just on a personal level, and then also the type of writing in this book I just didn't really enjoy. The next one on this list is not a horror book, but is a historical fantasy type of story, and it is Circe by Madeline Miller. So I read this thinking I could get into popular books at the time, and quickly realized that maybe popular books aren't for me. This was a horrendous experience. I did not like this one bit. It was such a drag. Again, it was around writing. I don't really enjoy Madeline's writing style. This book was so long and felt really drawn out in the storyline and the plot, but it is a short book, so it could be the influence of her writing style that's just not for me, and it really made this book drag on, and I probably should have DNF'd it, but again, at the time I didn't DNF books, so this is why this is one I also regret reading. The next one is again another fantasy story, and it's The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. Again, this was a popular book, recommended on BookTube and everywhere else. I've seen it on Instagram so many times, and I didn't enjoy this one bit. Again, I don't really understand what's my problem with certain writing styles, but this was too flowery. It just didn't work for me. I wasn't a fan of this book. I didn't really enjoy the characters either. They were developing, but not something that I could connect with. And again, there was a lot of different perspectives in this story as well. So I think for me, I don't really connect well with books that have that. So again, I do regret reading this book as well. Next up is one that I absolutely despised reading, and that was Horror Hotel. This is a young adult book that is centered around the true crime story in the Cecil Hotel in LA, where Elisa Lam was found dead in the water tank of this hotel. And they've kind of taken that story, fictionalized it, and turned it into Horror Hotel. And it was just like a direct copy from the actual storyline. So I really hated that aspect of this book. It felt like it wasn't original. It was just copying and pasting and just tweaking little bits of this book. So yeah, I regret reading this book because it just was not original. There was no depth. The characters were really annoying. So yeah, I don't recommend reading Horror Hotel to anybody. The next book is Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. I read this one recently and really disliked the writing and the overall theming that was discussed. It felt like it was being disgusting just to be disgusting. And I feel like a lot of Eric LaRocca books are like that. So I have taken the executive decision to never read from this author again. I really dislike his writing styles and what he discusses. There's no real underlying message. It's just disgusting to be disgusting. And there is a lot of ableism in this book. So yeah, it's not for me, and I won't be returning to this author. The next book is a thriller, which is The Writing Retreat. This one is again another popular book with everybody, and I couldn't connect with this book. The overall plot of this was really boring, and it felt like there was barely any thriller aspects in this, so it wasn't for me. Next up is The Christmas Jigsaw Murders. The Christmas Jigsaw Murders. This one was a book that I read last year for Christmas time, and yeah, it did not have a plot whatsoever. It just was a murder mystery at Christmas, and it tried to be too much like Agatha Christie, but it was definitely not like that. The writing was very poor, and yeah, I did not enjoy this book myself, but I do know that some people have enjoyed this one, so I think it's a personal preference. Next up is a book that I was highly anticipating reading. I was wanting to read this book for a really long time, but because it was an Icelandic story, I couldn't find it anywhere in the UK that was pretty cheap for me. So I found it in a library, and I kind of picked it up, read it, and kind of realized I overhyped this book for no reason. And that is The Day is Dark. And yeah, this book, I think I put too much on it for it to be a really good read. And for that reason, I feel like it lacked in the overall story. And I think that's just a me problem. I put too much emphasis on this book, that it was going to be one of my favorite books of all time, and that it was going to be a really good story, but alas, it wasn't. And I think I need to be careful when I do that in the future, not to place too much anticipation on books, because I could get let down like I did with The Day is Dark. Next up is a classic, and that is The Great Gatsby. I regret reading this book because it had a different type of writing style. Obviously, being an older book, we have the more classical type of language going on, and for me, a lot of the time, I can read those books and really enjoy that writing style. But The Great Gatsby, when I read it, I really did not enjoy it. I think it's down to the timing that I was reading this book. If I might give it another go at some point, but at this point in time, I do regret reading this book because it was just boring. I really did not enjoy this book one bit in terms of the overall storyline. And to me, it didn't feel like much was happening. But I know it is a favorite classic for a lot of people. So again, this is just a me issue. Probably just didn't enjoy it at the time. And I could possibly give this a go at another point. Following the classic theme, we have a Jane Austen, and that's Sense and Sensibility. This one, I really just, again, down to timing, I think, just did not enjoy this book. I don't think I will reread it just because it is pretty boring and not something that I enjoy. It's not the type of book that I would pick up and personally love. So yeah, I'm going to just leave the classics in terms of like generalized fiction, because I just cannot really connect with those types of stories. The next book is a book called Chills. This is one I found on Scribd at the time, and it was a polar-based crime thriller, and I thought it would be up my alley because I do love the polar horror, the whole dark, creepy, chilling atmosphere books. And I read it during the winter season a few years ago now. And yeah, it's just not a good book. The themes and discussions and the ethics in this book, I just really did not enjoy. It's not one that I would recommend to people either. So yeah, I kind of regret reading it because it just didn't connect with me and I felt a bit off with the theming. So the last book that is on this list is called The Coffin Path, and this one is a thriller book that is set in the 18 or 1900s. And for me, again, I think it's down to writing style. Really did not connect with the characters in this book or the storyline. And I think that's really down to my personal preference in writing. This book just wasn't it, and I didn't enjoy reading it. So the takeaway from this video for me is that I have a problem with connecting with characters when the writing style is off. And if I'm not really enjoying a book, I need to just DNF it, because why put yourself through the pain? So yeah, it's been quite interesting to sit back and think about the books that I regret reading, and I feel like for me, I do have a greater understanding of what I enjoy to read now. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I didn't give you descriptions of any of these books because they are books that I regret reading, so I'm not going to give you synopses simply because I wouldn't recommend that you read them. But if you are interested, you can find them anywhere online if you wanted to check out what they are about. But yeah, that's it for me today. I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what book you regret reading. And until the next time, keep your pages turning and embrace the darkness. Bye!